Well, I am showing the time is 10:30, so let's go ahead and get started. We can at least go over the housekeeping information in that, and then hopefully we'll get a few more folks joining us. So good morning, everyone. My name is Jody King, and I'm a contract specialist with the Alaska Apex Accelerator. It was formerly the Alaska PTAC. And this morning we're going to be talking about parsing past performance. And joining me this morning is Randy Miller, who's the Procurement Center representative from SBA. Randy, if you want to take a moment, say hello.
Hello, everybody. As Jody said, I'm Randy. I am the Procurement Center representative for several agencies on the Area 6 West Coast. I live here in Alaska. History, I've been here with SBA since 2018, I'm sorry. Senior moment. Prior to that, I was a small business specialist and contracting officer with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and prior to that with the Air Force. So, and my role is to get as much of the federal contracting dollars to small business as practical. That is all.
Thanks. Yeah, I know after a while you start talking back. I was at a knitting class yesterday, and she was talking about, 2018 wasn't that long ago. And it's like, wait, now when we start looking at it, yeah, it's quite a history already. Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about this morning. We're going to talk about defining the topic, purpose of past performance. We're going to look at looking for performance data. We're going to go through the agency sources, the CPARs, FAPIS, DSBS, evaluation factors, past performance, and of course, questionnaires and surveys. And then we're going to talk about it from the business side, gathering that data, maintaining a past performance database, and then how are we going to use this past performance after we went through all of the effort of gathering it and developing those processes to have that data when we need it. So let's dive into definitions to start off with. So of course, when I'm talking about creating titles for my webinars, I want something that's more memorable and, heavens forbid, not quite the tongue-tying phrase, but I was thinking about that word parsing when we're talking about parsing past performance. And often it's used for computer terminologies. I was looking at all the various definitions through psychology, but really just the dictionary.com is that parsing itself is the act or process of analyzing language, behavior, events closely or minutely to discover their implications or deeper meaning. So when it comes to us looking at taking this action and breaking down, analyzing the language, analyzing the definition, the who we worked for, the what we did, and those details, we can then identify those goals that we need to set, identify what is important. When we're looking at past performance, what of it is important? And quite honestly, that depends on how we are using that information. And all of this is geared towards building that solid and well-tailored response to a solicitation when that solicitation is talking about past performance as an evaluation factor. So to identify what is important, we really need to have a good look at those solicitation and what is it that the agency is calling out that they're looking for that experience. And then we're going to gather that past performance data. And honestly, if we're doing that as a fresh start with every single solicitation, that can become quite the burdensome act to do for every unique solicitation that we're responding to, is that we're now starting from scratch. So today's webinar will hopefully help you pull all of this together and create this database where you can then pull the best value out of your performance history to be able to respond then to those solicitations. So we're going to identify, we're going to gather, and then we're going to link that data to the performance work statement and those agency key requirements. So let's keep these three goals in mind as we go through and talking about looking at all the details, pulling the information together, and then matching it to its needed purpose. All right. Oh, good. We've had a few more people join us this morning. Just real quick, I just want to pull everybody's attention to the handouts. And if you, for any reason, you're unable to download the handouts, you can always reply to your webinar invite. Let me know that you need those, and I can get those out to you as well. All right. So let's take a moment and talk about experience versus past performance. And this can be a little bit confusing. And this can also start off that whole process of, I need government experience to be able to get contracts to have past performance, but I actually have to get government contracts to be able to have past performance. And sometimes we get a little bit caught up in that it has to be federal activity and it has to be, you know, these perfect match to have the appropriate past performance. And let's take a moment and talk about experience versus that past performance. So if you can see this from this little Venn diagram here, we have the experience in the blue and the past performance, and we have that overlap. And this is, of course, that sweet spot of those data and those highlight points that we want to be able to pull together for our response for the solicitation. So for experience, though, we're talking about number of years in the industry. So it's quantitative. And the individual experience, including time with other companies. So when we say individual, this could be just that, not only the company as an individual entity itself and the company's projects and number of years in business, number of years providing those goods or services, but also the individuals within that company that will come through the life of the company that bring with them their individual experience and expertise and know-how. And these things are very valuable and marketable, but they are, again, individual, and then they pull into the company's past performance. So we have a similarity of project type, familiarity of project, and company completed projects. So again, this is kind of that, yes, our company has done this. Yes, we have employees that have experience, whether through this company or through prior employment. We have our internal experts, so we have our quantitative. For past performance, then, this is how we did it. So experience is, yes, we have that, and here's the number of years, again, that quantitative. And then the past performance side of it is the qualitative. How did we do? What was the quality of our product or service? How did we maintain cost control? How was our schedule and our timeliness? Did we stay on cost, on time? Were we able to deliver? If we had issues, were we able to resolve that? If there were changes within your contract, were you able to resolve that in a timely manner and have alternates? If there were change orders, if there were things, because stuff is never quite as simple as it would seem on paper, that as we get into the project, there will be changes, whether through the agency wanting to adjust or through industry where suddenly things are not available, or we have circumstance, you know, like the pandemic, where suddenly materials are scarce or labor is scarce. So this becomes the how do we handle those types of scenarios? What about our small business subcontracting? What was the performance on that of reaching small business goals on previous contracts or previous projects? And again, were we able to resolve those concerns? What was our communication technique? How did we do working with that owner, with our subcontractors, with our suppliers? So when we talk about that experience versus past performance, again, quantitative on the experience side, qualitative on the past performance. And what we want is to find this nice, lovely gray area here where both of those really happen to align. And maybe we're over on this corner where we have employees or teaming partners that we've brought aboard for the actual performance that has a more highlighted specific experience with this type of work, although the company itself might be slightly newer on performing it itself, or where you've done very similar projects, but there's a few unique, or your company is diversifying or expanding into, for example, for construction, where you've been a specialty and a subcontractor, and now you're stepping into that general construction where you are the prime instead of that subcontractor. So this is kind of the area that we are wanting to really think about and have as our sweet spot, that we're going to build and have all of this information gathered so that when we respond to our solicitations, we're going to be right on that target. Any questions on that? Now, another thing that I want to talk about is a lot of times, and just as I mentioned, that whole chicken and egg scenario, that businesses get a little hung up that they need past performance in government contracting to get government contracts, but they fail to look at what they've done in the commercial realm or residential realm, that non-governmental owner, and looking at those projects as well and pulling that into that governmental experience. Because again, it's not so much that I have done a lot of jobs with the Corps of Engineers, but those industry types are scattered all over, from delivery, maybe I did some paving, maybe we've installed some carpets, maybe I've sold them some things where that, again, what it was that we've done, where we've had that scattered experience. But again, we're looking at that scope of work, that performance work statement, to really tie those together. So never put that blinders on that's it has to be government only when we're responding to our past performance criteria. Okay. Any questions or comments you want to throw in there, Randy?
Nope, you're doing a great job, Jody.
Thanks. I threw that in there so I could quick grab some water while you were like, where's the mute button?
That's exactly what I was doing.
One thing with it being so cold, it's like, oh my gosh, talking is thirsty work. All right, so let's talk about what DAU has for defining the topic. So past performance information is relevant information for source selection purposes regarding a contractor's action under previously awarded contracts. Now, even though DAU, and this is the Defense Acquisition University, is talking about previous awarded contracts, and of course, the FAR, the language not, because they're in that government realm, they are going to be focusing more on that performance history under the government realm. But it doesn't mean that you can only use government contracting related experience and you have to leave out the commercial. So again, just keep that in mind. So again, relevant information for source selection purposes regarding a contractor's actions under previously awarded contract. It includes the contractor's record of conforming to contract requirements and to standards of good workmanship. It's the record of forecasting and controlling costs, adherence to contract schedules, including administrative aspects of performance. So this is the contract compliance, submitting all of the documentations, the reports, the invoices, doing your reporting mechanisms as required for that contract, and the history of reasonable and cooperative behavior and commitment to customer satisfaction. And this term here is going to come in become important factor when we get further in and start talking at CPARs. Look in reasonable and cooperative behavior. And of course, that record of integrity and business ethics and the business-like concern for the interests of the customer. So pretty good, really arcing. These are the type of things, and this is where DAU is teaching the contracting realm on the government side for, again, the source selection. These are the pertinent bits of data that they're looking for that risk concern for the government. Is your potential contractor, when we look at all of the other factors in that past performance as a component for determining award, these are some of the main areas that we need to think about. Now, sorry about this text heavy slide, but again, this is still from the same website and I have it linked here below. It's the requirement to evaluate past performance also depends on the type of acquisition being conducted. So here you can see it's broken out by commercial items. Past performance should be an important element of every evaluation and contract award. For simplified acquisitions, may be an evaluation in addition to price. And when we start to get into the negotiated acquisitions, and now we have the technical or past performance considerations play a more dominant role in sources selection when the requirement is less defined, or 2, more development work is required, and or 3, performance risk is greater. So this is our way of, from the government perspective, of risk management. We're spending X number of dollars and we're in this competitive realm. We have to figure out all of those components to help us decide who is going to be the awardee. But this, again, that past performance helps mitigate risk by trying to find someone that has that direct experience. And of course, then depending on the type, the more weighted that past performance can become. Here in blue, the quality of the product or service must be addressed in every source selection through consideration of one or more non-cost evaluation factors such as past performance, compliance with requirements, technical excellence, management capability, personnel qualifications, and prior experience. So past performance in of itself is never a standalone, but is one of those evaluation factors. And of course, here in gray, past performance must be evaluated in all source selections for negotiated competitive acquisitions expected to exceed the simplified acquisition threshold. So when we're talking at the other end, the commercial simplified acquisition, it may be an evaluation factor depending on the simplicity of the solicitation activity itself. And then once we get into the more negotiated and we start getting over that 250,000, oh gosh, Randy, help me out. Was this 250 raised for the simplified,
Nope.
for the SAP? Still 250?
No, it's still
Okay.
250. Yep.
Thank you. And so under that dollar amount, again, or once we get over that threshold, then yes, absolutely, past performance becomes a must.
Let me inject just real quick there, Jody.
Yes, please.
As a contracting officer, you actually evaluate past performance on everything you do. It's just the documentation and the level that you're evaluating it increases with complexity. There was something else I was going to mention too, but it completely slipped my mind.
Well, feel free to jump in at any time. So
oh, I know
now
what I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of our catchwords from the very, very beginning of my career in government contracting was the best indicator of future performance is past performance, or reverse, past performance is the most important indicator of future performance. So it's taken very seriously, and even though it's just one of the evaluation factors, it becomes sometimes the most important evaluation factor if there's negative past performance on file. So that's all.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about that too further on, the type of, if we do have any negative comments. So we'll get into that as well. Thanks, Randy. Okay, so FAR requirements, contractor performance assessment reporting, CPARs, sources. So FAR requirements for evaluating, and again, this is the same DEAU website, the official source for past performance information upon which contracting officers can draw is the government-wide Performance Information Repository, or CPARs, the Contractor Performance Assessment Reporting System. In addition to CPARs, contracting officers use the following sources of information to support such determinations. SAM, System for Award Management, and this is where FAPIS is, and I'm going to show you some screenshots of all of these, and we'll talk about that too. Records and experience data, including verifiable knowledge of personnel within the contracting office, audit offices, and contract administration office. So if you don't think that it's a small community up here and that contracting officers don't talk to each other across agencies, I wouldn't count on that. Absolutely. We are a small community. Contracting officers do talk to each other. Those contracting officers move from agency to agency and bring that experience and that knowledge. And absolutely, there's also that opinion and knowledge from those contracting officer technical reps, the CORs and COTRs. So again, verifiable knowledge of personnel with contracting office. 3, the prospective contractor, including information provided in a bid or proposal certifications. So those are the questionnaire, financial data, information, or production equipment, et cetera. So it's 1, we have the CPARs record, we have SAM. Another source is the Dynamic Small Business Search, but then we also have the submitted questionnaires and surveys that the potential awardee, the offeree, get that, but that you're putting together in your solicitation package. Okay, so we have pre-award survey reports, commercial sources of supplier, and other information such as publications, suppliers, subcontractors, customers. So keep this in mind. There's a large realm of past performance data that the contracting officer can pull into should they decide to do a little bit more digging other than what's provided necessarily within that solicitation package. Okay, so let's talk about the different agency sources. So CPARs is an interesting one. And this is that formalized reporting mechanism, that reporting database that contracting officers should go through and provide information on these very specific performance criteria, performance points, and they have defined rating classifications. And I pulled this right off FAR 42-1503. It's a great source if you really want to get into that text of what should it be. And we have this reporting table and these classifications, these ratings: exceptional, very good, satisfactory, marginal, unsatisfactory. There are training resources for the CPARs. And what I should have had this slide next, I'm going to hop back and forth while we're talking about CPARs, is these dollar thresholds. So this is what makes CPARs a little bit challenging if you're a small business and you're just starting to get into the government contracting realm and you're trying to build this official past performance, or you're a subcontractor. So you either have contracts underneath these thresholds where at which the requirement for the agency, for the contracting office to complete the CPAR evaluations may or may not kick in.
Jody, could we go back to the ratings for just a moment? I want to make a comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, please. I'm kind of hopping around, but yes.
We're going to do a training that dives deeper into CPARs in a month or two. But what I want to mention here, though, is for the actual CPAR systems and for the ratings, the vast majority of those should be and will be satisfactory. We're used to having good ratings in our life, for doing good things. But if you do what the contract requires you to do, you provide the item that was required and you delivered on time, you provided the services on time, that's satisfactory and that's good. There's nothing wrong with a satisfactory report. And so I just want to point that out, that oftentimes, I know me, I'm used to performing at the highest levels. And if someone says satisfactory when there's very good or exceptional out there, I'm kind of offended. In this case, you have to do something over and above the basic contract requirements, like delivering early or providing something of value to the government. It's a very slippery slope because the government can't accept anything for free, right? So you can't add an extra computer and say, hey, now we're exceptional, right? So it's things that are of value to the government. And I just want to point that out, that in this case, when you see satisfactory ratings on CPARs, that's okay. That's a good thing. The most important part about the CPARs ratings is the word just escaped me, but basically the write-up, what the words that are in it. And we'll talk about that in a later class.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, absolutely. Because CPARs it's kind of this, if you're not already involved in it, if you are not already doing contracts at certain dollar thresholds where this is now become part of your contract performance, your contract administration, and that post follow-up. And we'll talk about this concept outside of the CPARs realm. It feels a bit nebulous because, again, it's not mandatory for the contracting officer to complete until certain thresholds. But it doesn't mean that you can't request if you're under that threshold and it isn't necessarily triggered as an automatic requirement, that you couldn't request a CPARS rating or an evaluation that can be entered into the CPARS system. So let me
Absolutely.
break
And I also
that
want
up.
to mention,
Yeah,
I
please,
just want to
Randy.
mention that marginal, if you do get a CPARS rating and they're done annually, and at the end of the period of performance. So if you have a contract that lasts more than a year, the marginal one, the key to marginal, if you ever get a marginal rating, and it's especially if it's the final one, but it's important in all of them, you need to address that in your reply, your response to it. Notice on marginal, it says, contractor performance of the element sub-element being evaluated reflects a serious problem which contractor has not yet identified corrective actions. The contractor's proposed actions appear only marginally effective or were not fully implemented. So it's okay if you have a problem on the contract, if you fix it, right? We had one of our contractors, we were cleaning up some dirty dirt, and they had a barge dump a whole bunch of dirt into a river. It was really, really bad, but they fixed it. And so those cases, that's what I just want to point out, is if you're rated as marginal, but you fixed whatever the issue was, you need to address that and say, no, we resolved this. So,
Absolutely. Because if you think about that, and situations happen, and we're going to say fault and actions, no finger pointing or no blame, but things happen that disrupt what we want as ideal performance, and it's how do we handle that? And if you look back in those DAU classes that they're talking about, it's that managerial experience and that relationship and that problem solving too, because that is something that is a good indicator. So yes, if you have these formal CPAR evaluations and these ratings that are available for contracting officers to look at, again, as Randy's mentioned, you want to be able to address those, because what if this project that may had a marginal response was an exact, apple to oranges, but an apple to apple fit for the new solicitation based on the scope, what it was we're going to do, explain. But again, you had those corrective actions, and you were able to overcome, resolve, and end the contract in a good light, even if there were hiccups along the way. And we can talk more about that further in when we talk about developing those databases. Randy, if you would, I want to talk thresholds a little bit, because I will be honest, starting in my realm, into the contracting world, this was one of those, it was confusing at when can I expect that, yes, this has to be done versus maybe I'm requesting. Do you have any highlight or comment? And I pulled this right off their guidance document.
Yeah, and this the confusing part about this is there's different thresholds for DoD and all the other agencies. So the easy one is A&E. If you're an A&E above 35,000, you will get CPARs, and terminations for default also. And then that's across both agencies. If you're non-DoD, it's the SAT, right, $250,000, which has been for a while now, and this is total contract value. It's not by option period or items. If you had a contract for 2 bulldozers, and it was $259,000 for both of them, you're going to get CPARs. DoD, all the military agencies, systems. That's like systems are things like F-15s, battleships. Those are what we're talking about, systems in general. That was another one that was kind of confusing for me for a while until I figured out. But these are big, overreaching systems. Non-systems operation support. So that's operation support at, no, you know what? I'm not even sure, because services were at $1 million. IT's at $1 million. Ship repair and overhaul, that's a very specialized with this group. I'm guessing the group that's here isn't doing that, but they might be. And that's over $500,000. And then the A&E, of course, and construction is $750,000, the same as DoD agencies. So where if you're doing a IT services contract for DoD and it's under $1 million, they don't have to do CPARs. If you're doing the same contract for the department or the Parks Department, if it's over $250,000, they would be doing mandatory CPARs. And again, like Jody said, if you do a good job and you need to get some CPARs out there, you need some actual past performance for contracts that you're planning on doing in the future, ask the contracting officer if they'll do it. And again, in the later class, we'll get into that more, but even better, and this goes for all CPARs, but especially if you're asking to do one when they don't have to, write it for them. Know what the categories are in CPARs, write it for them and offer it to them. Say, would you be willing to do a CPARs report for me, even though it's under the threshold? I've prepared this. This is my position. Use as you feel fit. And it makes it a lot easier for the contracting officer if they have that. Then either they know, depending on your performance, or the program people will know. Like for me, when I was a CO, and when I always went to my program people and said, "Hey, this is what I got from the contractor. What do you agree with it? Do you have any other input?" So don't think that you're just going to take it and whatever you say and put it in there and run with it. But if it's accurate, they may just cut and paste it, and make their job easy is the point I'm trying to make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it gives you that opportunity to highlight certain factors of that performance as well. Because then if you go back to the slide here, let's go back, where we're talking about these different ratings, but and again, you can go to, I have the FAR here, the 421503, there's a link here for acquisition.gov, and you can really blow this up and take a look at how are they justified to justify an exceptional rating, and what are the factors that should be addressed for performance as well. And it goes back to that same thing with the DAU slide where they were talking about those different categories listed of sections of performance.
And another point here is that people differ, right? And it could be a contracting officer who's your reporting official. It could be your Q&A people. It could be the program manager that's writing the meat of this. And they sometimes don't understand these ratings well. If you get a very good or exceptional for doing your job, don't fight it. Take it and say, oh, that was cool. If you get below a satisfactory and you don't agree with it, absolutely. Number one, put in writing why you don't agree with it, and non-concur. That the chart that we were just looking at showed the reviewing official. That's the person that if you get a CPARs, normally you would say, yeah, this looks good, and put a few entries in there. And I always suggest you put entries in it. You know, hey, it was great working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on this project. We hope they do more. So you don't have to get real wordy, but just a little bit. But if they give you a marginal or an unsat and say they would not recommend you for future contracts, fight that, put your position down in writing, and non-concur. That's where that reviewing official comes in. If you say non-concur, it goes back and it has to go up. Well, look at that chart again, but at least one level above the reviewing official to review it. We see at times, and it's pretty clear that there's a personality issue. Whoever's writing the CPARs report is mad about something because you didn't do what they told you to do, even though you did exactly what the contract said you're supposed to do. And when we see those, in my mind, it's pretty clear. It's like this person has an axe to grind. But those types of things should not be in CPARs. And if they get put in there, absolutely do everything you can to address them.
Absolutely. So I threw this screen back up, one, to let you guys know that there are these training by function or training by role. Here's the link for them as well. But it kind of gives you this idea of role here because we're talking about the government user roles and the entity user role. So we have the contractor representative and the corporate senior contract representative, depending on your hierarchy and how you set up those user roles. But again, on the training by the roles and functions, they may be the same individuals doing that. But on the agency side, you might have somebody coming in after the contract and as part of the final closeout, and they weren't there on the day-to-day activity, but they are the ones then that is doing that final write-up on your formal evaluation at that end of that completion, especially if it's a multi-year project. So again, the short and fast takeaway for CPARs now is this is a formalized, documented, interactive process that is triggered as required activities at certain dollar threshold, depending on the industry, again, depending on whether it's DoD or civilian, non-DoD agencies. And sometimes it happens in a timely manner. Sometimes all parties are involved and it becomes something they're like, oh yeah, we got to do this after the fact. And you might have new players involved on that governmental side that weren't there as part of the day-to-day when you guys had great fixes and great resolutions and great, got over these hiccup moments, whether again, COVID, surprise, or things happen. But keep in mind that this is a formalized process, and when you start hitting these dollars, this becomes something that to be a successful contractor, you need to have your standard operating procedures address this, and this needs to become part of doing that contract. And I'm going to talk a bit about it when we're at the end of this presentation and we're talking about building that database, but it's something that hopefully you're not having to chase down after a lot of time has passed, because keep in mind, by then our memory is overwritten with current issues and products and projects, and maybe your contracting officer is dealing with a whole nother contract that has them feeling sour, and now they're having to go back and play paperwork catch up. So keep in mind, this is a very formalized process, and this is going to be formalized data that both the government has access to, and then that we, as someone with our CPARs record, can use in response to solicitations as well. And as Randy has mentioned, he has a fabulous workshop that we haven't done in a while. And as soon as we get that scheduled, where we really dig into CPAR specifically, I will let all of you know when that is scheduled. And Randy does a great job, and we really get into the process as well as just what is it. But for today, let's move on to other sources that the contracting officer has. So let's get my little forward mechanism working here. Okay, so we talked about the thresholds, and so let's move on to SAPIS. So, and I just blanked what that actually stood for. And I just grabbed the record from Sam. So SAPIS is this responsibility qualification records, and it has been moved under the SAM realm, and it is an interesting, really, I think last year, 2023, we started to see this populated, and where contractors were suddenly surprised that there was negative performance information in FAPIS in SAM under the exclusion. And you can kind of see it. I don't know why SAM, this is right off the SAM website. Here's the link for this FAQ page. And they always blur, making it hard to see. But under this responsibility qualification, there's information that the contracting officers can plug in here, whether or not that there is a CPAR tied to this rating. Maybe it's under the dollar threshold, or for some reason you were declared ineligible for possible awards. So this exclusion information, again, ineligible proceedings pending, ineligible proceedings completed, prohibition, restriction, voluntary exclusion. So this might be where you got blacklisted or banned, or maybe you had termination for cause or some other reason where now you are being penalized and you are not eligible for contracts for a time period. But it can also get into where you were removed from consideration if you had other factors such as a certificate of competency was done and you were deemed not a responsive bidder. For some reason, it was determined that you were not contract ready for that particular action and were removed from consideration.
In those instances, if you have that, contact my office and we will try and get those removed for you. There was some that were wrongly entered, and there was some that came over when they brought FAPIS into SAM. There was information in FAPIS which only government entities could see, that was brought over, and well, they're still seen, but we've known instances where contractors are losing out on contracts because of derogatory information here, and we've been successful in removing those at times.
Yes. So FAPIS were a good for those, and especially for you if you're looking for subcontractors and you have a responsibility as a prime to ensure that you're not bringing in subcontractors that should be ineligible for award to receive those federal dollars. So looking at this in SAM and looking at their responsibility qualifications and looking for exclusions is really important. But there's these other factors that they can get into where they were deemed ineligible. And there was an incident that Randy and I worked on for a company, and it was just odd. They just were decided somebody lost that award because this was here from a previous entry where they just simply weren't the awardee. So there is a little bit of confusion as this was all transferred over. It's just something you should be aware of. One, this is data that is available for contracting officers. And yes, they're looking because they're making sure that you are eligible for award, but there are other factors that can be linked to your profile. You might have flags in here if you owe other federal IRS or other, so there may be some flags that aren't necessarily making you ineligible, but that might cause a contracting officer, especially if they don't have a lot of experience with this system, to hesitate. So be aware of. So yes, FAPIS. Randy, do you remember what FAPIS stands for? Oh, here it is.
Federal Awardee Performance and Integrity Information System.
I owe you a cookie, Randy. Woohoo!
I put it in the chat too. In our chat.
Thanks. All of a sudden I looked at it and blanked. The joy of acronyms. But yeah, right here, federal awardee. So this is something that you do need to pay attention to. It does have a component. It isn't necessarily as visible or critical at the higher dollar amounts like the CPARs, but absolutely, this is something that they are looking at. And again, really for looking for those exclusions. All right, here's one.
FAPIS is where the termination information goes. So if you were terminated for cause, that's where it would be.
Yes. So again, proceedings information, and it's the proceedings. You know, have current, active, have within the last 5 years been subject to a criminal or civil or other administrative. So yes, again, those eligibility that comes back. So, and I didn't grab the entirety of this FAQ from the SAM site. I just wanted to get enough for us to be able to talk about and where you could quick double check in your own SAM profile. Don't log in, but actually do a search from your SAM profile from that public record and then click on that responsibility qualification. All right. So let's talk about the dynamic small business search, because I think this is a little bit of an underutilized opportunity for contractors. One, for passive marketing, just saying, hey, look at what we've done. You know, it's like putting all of those A papers up on the refrigerator and those kids' art projects. It's a missed opportunity that businesses do not think about and do not take the time and effort to enter the data. So when we do our SAM registration, that core data feeds into SBA's dynamic small business search. And it makes this lovely searchable database where we can go in and look, we can pre-filter for looking for government certifications. And of course, this is only the top half of the screen for purpose of today. But there's so much information that you can enter in addition that you need to make a point of going into your DSBS profile and updating it in addition to updating your main SAM profile. And for today, for talking about past performance, while we're bringing it up, is here, your performance history. So last night, to get a good screenshot, so I had an example, I just did a search by, I threw in a construction NAICS code, that 236220 in Alaska, and I just went through until I found a contractor that had actually taken the time to put in this performance history. And I can then go in and look, and this is New Horizons Telecom. I didn't pick them for one way or another, other than I went through 5 records before I found someone that had actually taken the time to fill this information out. So you can see here's the blank format. And if you're looking at, well, how do I enter this and what should I be entering? I do have a webinar called Supersize Your SBA Profile that's available now on the Alaska Apex website under the on-demand training. You can download the slides, the attachments, but I really talk about the importance of completing these past performance references. So what if you're responding to a commercial buy, it's under that FAR Part 12, that commercial activity, and past performance may or may not be a component. Maybe it's just simply one of those technically acceptable, low price, technically acceptable, but they are the contracting officers looking at, well, what is that performance? People are looking at this information, and if you don't provide any, I don't know if you don't have past performance, or you have past performance and you're just not doing it, or if you've actually listed something and it's 10 years old. I don't know, when I'm looking at your profile, if you had a moment and you've had nothing since, or are you just so busy that nobody's thinking to come back and fill this out? So I really am kind of the, if this was on a test, here's my stop moment, that this is a free, low effort point to get your past performance out there into the realm of, I have had these awards, whether commercial or government, and I can put that information in there. One of the things that I want to remind people is this has to be updated, because past performance, to be usable in the purpose of a solicitation, a lot of times there's going to be a time range in the last 3 to 5 years. Or if it is a complex project that doesn't happen with regular frequency, they might even go back 10 years. If you're looking at a past performance requirement in a solicitation and the contracting officer is defined, we only are going to count things within the last 3 to 5 years, and you have a perfect spot on project that is maybe just outside of that time range, you can always submit the question in writing during the solicitation, pre-bid before the due date, and ask the question, would you be willing to extend that time, that past time for consideration for past performance. Would you go back 10 years or allow us? And the contracting officer can change that while it's in that solicitation phase. Randy, do you have any comments you want to add on this one? I could keep going. This one drives me nuts.
Other than DSBS is a fantastic tool. It used to be pretty slow. It's pretty fast these days.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And it is undergoing a revamp. At some point, it's gonna have more features. But anyway, I just foot stomp. DSBS is a great tool for searching for small businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're still predominantly in the subcontracting realm, you can put your contract data in here with the prime. Have the prime's name, have, the project. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I have a whole hour talking about just this, building up your profile. Again, check that out, that Supersize Your SBA profile. You can skim towards the back half when I talk about just building this. But when we look at this example here that I was able to find, look at the players, Northrop Grumman, AT&T, Cordovas. These are big companies. And these are, if you look at these start and end dates for the contracts, these are some long-term contracts. This is a long relationship. And you can see these dollar thresholds immediately. If I'm looking for someone in telecom, just because that's their name, I am much more encouraged to reach out to this individual than to the individuals that may have been around forever but have never, there's nothing listed. Their reference will actually say none given when you look at the profile in the DSBS. So think about this. This is a source that agencies are taught to use. It's available there, especially if they're trying to decide how are they going to market in the market research when they're putting that solicitation together. Anyway, very, very, very important site, and it's easily overlooked. All right, let's move on. So let's talk about evaluation factors. So we kind of just did this big, okay, what is it? What do we have to do? Why do we have to do it? But let's talk about it in the realm of the solicitation itself. What is its importance? So, and I just grabbed this. This is out of an active solicitation that I had pulled up last night. Oh, gosh, sorry guys, ignore the reference. That's the wrong reference for this. But here we can see in the instruction to offers, this is a commercial product. It says past performance information when included as an evaluation factor and to include recent relevant contracts, similar items, other references. And so it starts talking about it here in the instructions to bidders, but in the evaluation, it says the government will award a contract resulting from the solicitation, okay, standard boilerplate language, but here's our evaluation criteria and the weighted factor, technical, past performance, and price. So you can see that as we had talked about, that past performance becomes that risk mitigator and helps take care of that uncertainty as if you're an unknown entity to this contracting officer. So we're going to see how is it related. And when we're talking about evaluation factors, if past performance is factor number one and it's the most critical, maybe we have a very technically complex solicitation that you're responding to, then in this case, if this is our, factor number one and it's our highest evaluation point, we want to make sure that the information that we're providing for purposes of being evaluated to be determined if we should be contract eligible or not, we want to make sure that we're really heavily looking at that performance work statement and what is it and what factors in the solicitation did the agency take the time to call out as critical points, and are you giving them easy to say, yeah, they've done this, look at this project. The example I was thinking about is roofing. So yep, maybe we've done roofs, and whether you're doing roof for a house or a small commercial facility, there's certain components, whether it's a commercial or governmental, that are the same. But what if you're doing a roof, and you're going to have to laugh at me because this was like 3 in the morning when I was thinking of my example, that I want, and of course I'm thinking of like, the Despicable Me where the roof lifts and suddenly a missile silo pops up? What if there's such a complexity to that roof that makes it outside of the normal? And yes, you may have 20 years providing industrial warehouse facility roofs from new construction or repair, but do you have that additional experience, that one-to-one, that I have a roof that when it's closed, it's sealable, but also lifts, maybe my helicopter can leave, or maybe my missile silo. But when you're looking at that technical, your past performance has to have some match components or enough supporting other document that's, well, maybe it's a stretch, but we think they can do it. Anybody else has watched that Despicable Me and, as the rocket takes off through the back of the house? All right, so let's move on. Okay, so questionnaire. So we talked about there's the formal places that we can look, CPARs, go into FAPIS, see if we're eligible for award, if there's any other factors that might have made us ineligible. We're talking about the dynamic small business search, where we should be up as business owners, as the profile holder, should be uploading that data. But the other option is for the within the solicitation package is for the contracting officer to tell you how they want their past performance, whether it's going to be you provide a narrative, or if they are going to give you a questionnaire that you complete. And again, you've got to really watch the directions within that solicitation. Is it you gather these completed questionnaires, and then you get to submit them with your package, or is the questionnaires completed by your previous clients, and the client then sends the questionnaire, the completed questionnaire, to the contracting officer, and it bypasses you, right? So you don't necessarily get to pick, choose, or edit, or do you really want to write that? Can you rethink, you don't get to renegotiate the truthfulness of that questionnaire response. Okay, so this was out of the same solicitation here. And again, it says government reserves the right to consider past performance questionnaires received after the due date, receipt of proposals. Okay. Reserves the right to contact references for verification or additional information, and the right to consider whether relevant past information may call customers whether or not they provided by the offerer to inquire about offerer's past performance. The government does not assume the duty to search for data to cure the problem it finds with the information provided by the offerer. Okay, the burden of providing thorough and complete past performance information remains with the offerer. All right, so if you are given a questionnaire in the solicitation packet, please use said questionnaire. If you are just asked to provide past performance information, it's an evaluation factor, but within the solicitation, there weren't directions on how the past performance is to be submitted. Hopefully you're writing up those questions and submitting that to the contracting officer while the Q&A period is still open. Do they want a narrative? Do they want a page limitation? Do they have questionnaires that could be used? Because what you want is you want all of your competitors to be evaluated in the same process that you are being evaluated. So if everybody can submit whatever they want, past performance, there's a lot of different ways that could be provided within the solicitation if no guidance or limitations are set, guidance given or limitations set. You want to even out that playing field so that the source committee, the evaluation committee, when they're going through and looking at this technical, we're kind of looking at the same formats and the same limited data being provided. If it's, again, an open-ended, well, yeah, you want yours to absolutely shine compared to somebody else that might have just thrown some stuff together and threw it in the packet and fingers crossed, off it goes. If the solicitation mentions a past performance questionnaire and one is not attached to the solicitation package, absolutely ask the contracting officer, the contract specialist that's assigned that solicitation. You let them know, you've mentioned a questionnaire, but I can't find one within the solicitation package. Can you please provide that? Again, you want everybody using the same format because then it makes that evaluation not just for you, but when comparatively to all the offers, makes it easier for comparison and contrast. All right, so let's talk about questionnaire examples. And I actually pulled all of these examples. I've given you some of these as attachments in the handout section of the GoToWebinar, simply because some of these have some great things that we should be thinking about and possibly using them when we start to build our own database of past performance. But I also wanted to show you the variation between solicitations between agencies of what was asked. So we have this one, and here's the link. Here's if you want to go to SAM and actually see the entirety of the project itself. But you can see this is just part of it. And I can actually pull up I have the whole documents open on screen if we want to do a deeper dive. But let me just go through our examples, and then we can always open those up and take a look at it. But you can see here's what they're looking for. This questionnaire defines how they want the evaluation coded. So again, we're defining satisfactory, marginal, unsatisfactory. Did you note from what we were talking about CPARs, it didn't have any exceptional or above average? Satisfactory is the highest level, as Randy had mentioned. That is good. They did what they said they were. We were satisfied. But look at the type of information, the contractor data. This would be you, the one submitting it. Here's your contract number, the contract type. Was it competitive? Period of performance, cost factors. So initial, final, and reasons for difference. If there was, was your final higher than the initial bid price? And a description of service provided. This is where it is really good for you to keep your solicitation documents, because that is going to give you some of that scope, some of that solicitation, so that if you're pulling past performance and you have the solicitation documents along with your contract file, that can help you pull that wording together. Take a look at that performance work statement. Don't just cut and paste, pull together a synopsis, especially if it was where we're really trying to highlight why this is a good example of your company's ability to perform on this new work that you are bidding on. Okay, so that's one questionnaire. Let's look at this one from GSA, and this one was pages. But the value of this, I guess the upside and the downside, if you're asking someone to fill it out, they're going to be much happier if it's a very short questionnaire versus one that's like 14 pages long. But if you look at the GSA, and I think this is a great one to really look at in depth, just what is being asked in the past performance, what information is needed. And again, it's nice that they have a rating process, so at least people are being rated the same, and you're not getting comments like, yeah, they were good, they were okay, I'm happy with them, it was satisfactory. What does satisfactory mean? What do those rating qualifications mean? And again, there's still that consistency between these questionnaires of gathering what is it that you're, who's the one performing the work, and then who's that client information as well, and then that contract data, size, date, performance, those type of factors. Now, here's one that'll be pulled from FAA, or I'm sorry, this was a Forest Service for one of their May talks where they were doing short, relevant past performance history, and this was more like providing references than actually providing past performance data. And this is just the top half of the page. They had 2 of these boxes per page, and my assumption looking at this is that these would be treated like references, where the agency then is going to be calling the names listed, agencies or the clients listed, to find out how did they do. So this might be something that's going to be used in an interview where the agency themselves is going to be using that should they decide to call and find out and ask and have how did they do, just like a job reference. So this was actually defined as survey in the solicitation, and this was the document. But again, you should start to see whether it's a survey or questionnaire, there's still some baseline data that's being asked with every single form. And here we had another survey. This was FAA's for, cafeteria. And here's what they're asking, and I just kind of typed them out because in case you couldn't see this is the same, current level. And again, you can see that they have a very easy process to keep the process, this is kind of a 1 through 5 rating, where 5 is excellent and 1 was not so excellent, and organization name, contact phone number. So this is just a very quick, short 1-page survey where they're just getting that top level. And these were the things: level of satisfaction over service, how quickly did they respond, how would you rate their problem solving capabilities, and follow-up of the operations management, and how would you rate the performance of on-site employees. And so what they're doing is they were giving these survey forms in the solicitation that you would then, as the offer, would have your clients fill these out, and then you're going to gather and submit that with the proposal. Again, when you're using these pre-packaged forms, make sure that you're following the directions, and if the directions aren't clear, how many do they want? Is there a minimum or a maximum? Ask those questions so that you're not necessarily inundating. If your solicitation has a page count limitation, ask if the past performance documents are part of that page count maximum or excluded from page count. So if you have 20 pages to do your entire proposal, does that include past performance, yes or no? So make sure that you're paying attention to that when you have these forms. But again, you can still see what is it they're looking for and a rating mechanism. This last one was just a linen mat rental and cleaning. It was a pretty straightforward, but again, important enough that they're looking for the survey information. So again, this is where you would submit this to your clients, ask them to complete, and then submit. And it says, please return survey to. So this is one where it's going directly to the contracting officer, the contract specialist, and it's not where your client is giving it to you for your review before you submit it in the solicitation. So I can't tell you how important that is to be aware of. Okay, one of the things with the surveys, and reading a lot of articles and information on that, if you are completing a survey where it's not where you're just giving a list, let's use this example. You're providing your past performance information and you are listing a company, your client, it's good to let the people know that, hey, one, ask permission. Do you mind if I use, the completion of our project as past performance information for another solicitation? It's possible that the contracting officer might reach out to you to ask about our performance. It's good to give somebody a heads up because one, if you have a point of contact, this right here, contact name, phone number, is that individual even in town, the month or so after the bid due date? So one, give them heads up, make sure, because you don't want any surprises where somebody had a grudge that you really didn't know about. You thought it was a job well done. So this is how you want to avoid surprises or even any appearance of negative, because suddenly somebody gets a call out of the blue and is being asked to do a survey on performance history. Questions or comments on that, guys? Do you guys have any more direct experience on it? Randy, anything you want to throw in there about surveys and questionnaires?
No, just that they're important to provide them.
Okay, so we're down to our last little bit, and we only have a few slides left. So let's talk about this gathering past performance. So when should you do it? And there's a couple of different methods, and what I didn't say is how. So we can either do it through a survey, like a client satisfaction survey. Maybe we send this out to all of our clients yearly or every 6 months and said, hey, what do you think of us? How are we doing? And again, this is more of a general client satisfaction. Current level of satisfaction, give them the range to choose from, just like you saw in those questionnaires, a 1 through 5, 5 good, 1 not so good. How quickly did we respond to your needs? How would you rate the problem solving capabilities? And you can see these are the questions I just pulled off because I thought they were really well done of this FAA survey. So gathering, again, you can kind of do this where you send out surveys and you hope your clients respond. On these project-specific survey, especially for activities where CPARs isn't going to be an automatic required, how are you going to track your performance and your client satisfaction, especially in these federal contracts? Do you want to set up a percentage or a time completion benchmark, and you check in with the contracting officer and with the technical representative? And maybe again, you have a short on-the-spot survey. They're in the field. You've just completed, there was a change order and a bunch of conversation. Ask them, how did we do? Do you feel that we have understood what you're looking for? Get that short feedback, especially if you can get it in writing, get it in an email. If it is a conversation, follow up with an email. Hey, we heard this from you. I just want to reiterate it. Do you agree with this statement? And yes, you're happy with how something was resolved. Those little highlight moments, those project specific, those on the spot surveys are great tidbits to have. So if you do have a CPARs requirement, you can provide that to the contracting officer on the performance year, whether it's your base year or one of the option years, or to have rolled up for your final project completion. Because we forget those little good moments, those gold star moments. So we want to capture them. So those project specific survey. And then these contract specific, and I say project versus contract because project might be commercial projects as well, where there isn't a formalized in that commercial world. There isn't necessarily a formalized past performance process like we run into for government contract. So you can develop that for your commercial clients so that you can then use those comments and use that data for responding to a federal solicitation. On contract specific surveys, these are the kinds of points that you want to make sure you're getting. The dollar threshold, we talk about that because for CPARs, those base year, option year, because if you have a 5-year contract and it has CPAR requirements, you should have your base, you should have 5, 6 evaluations through the length of that contract, 1 for each performance year, maybe just 5 because your final year they can do a roll up, and it's supposed to focus on the year just completed. So that type of information is we want to gather, and we want to think about how it is required from that CPARs world and take that process and those metrics and those comparison talk points and implement it into a process that we are doing this with all of our clients. And this really means that we need to be timely because we're all really busy, and coming back after the fact, it's harder to get good quality past performance information. I mean, how many times at the end of the day where a spouse or the kid says, hey, did you notice I cleaned the kitchen? And you've already been through the rest of the house, dinner's made, and that memory of that nice shiny kitchen is overwritten with current. So keep on top of this and develop a process, develop a operating procedure of how you are gathering this. And it can be on multiple levels. So if you just have site supervisors and with your subcontractor performance as well, and how that interaction captures those on the spot if there's a potential conflict moment. All right. Gathering data. So we talked about when, and now what is it that we want? So we were kind of breaking this into 2 components. Administrative data, And we could see those as the top of all those questionnaires, contact information, description of project, proposed price, completed total, start end dates. And then we have performance data, quality, schedule, customer satisfaction, management, personnel, cost, financial management, safety, security, responsiveness, ability to respond to an emergency or a contingency, compliance with contracts, terms, and provisions. Were all the reports done? If you had to provide a cure notice for any particular reason, did you do so in time? If you had submittals requirements, did you submit those on time? So that contract compliance, that internal reporting. Even if the contractor says, hey, when you're at a spend point, let us know. Were you maintaining that? So these are, again, administrative and these performance data points that we really want to gather. So developing the process. So we're gathering this data, that's great. Now, how are we going to store it so that we can retrieve it, use it again and again, and track its success? Now, I don't have a lot of great, here's what you need to do, but having a digital storage system and just establish as part of your operating procedures, how are you going to file that? And if you have a duplication of data where you have with the contract, so the contract information is complete as well, and then you have a separate folder filing system electronically for past performance information. You could even do hard files where you have some sort of binder system and you can tab it. Maybe you just do an Excel spreadsheet where you're breaking down contract numbers, a quick synopsis, the dollar amount where somebody could quick peruse and then maybe go back to a contract file to pull performance information. And again, developing these procedures and assigning responsibility roles for that contract closeout procedure, taking the time to look at your proposed versus your actual, because that's going to really give you that measure of how you did. And then, of course, performance audits, internal, looking at not that outward, how did we do, but internally looking at how did we do, where there's some areas where we missed the mark, or do we have areas where we really did pull together and come up with some innovative, and maybe we want to highlight that, and now we're adding those comments, those paragraphs of performance, and we're giving that to the contracting officer to possibly use of, hey, let me refresh your memory of what we accomplished through this when you're asking for that request for past performance or a past performance evaluation. If you are asking for the contracting officer to do a past performance evaluation and it's not going to be CPARs, this is where having them do a little questionnaire that they can provide a quick snapshot, that they can keep a copy for their contract file. You can keep a copy for your past performance, even if it's not necessarily being electronically submitted into that system. At least you have something that you can use for down the road. Subcontractors, do this type of thing with your prime. Have something that you can store and track because as you're growing to where you want to be the prime, now you have some direct experience that you can then correlate into performance. Using the past performance, and this is pretty much the end of our slides, the last topic. And I pulled this right off of a document that I have provided to you, and I thought it was really well written. This deep dive into past performance, how to maximize your scoring potential. And so these are the 6 areas that they are talking about when you're developing a past performance information to use for a solicitation. So my previous slides are talking about building a system in place so that you can easily retrieve and use and reuse data. But this is now talking about using that data in response to a solicitation. Select a portfolio of projects to maximize your score. Don't just say, yeah, you know, this shows that I know the agency. You may have done the work for JBER before, but is that project similar in scope to what the solicitation is? Start with a compliant template. Demonstrate relevancy, tie the work to the work you're bidding on, use metrics and proof points, and here they have a chart. I just grabbed a couple of the charts that they had within the document where you can see these proof point, so safety program factors. So this might have been pulled from the solicitation itself, and you're showing where you're providing that information. Add a meatball chart, and I put that in quotes because I'd never heard that term before, to the introduction if allowable. So maybe you can do something within your technical or in a cover letter. Again, pay attention to your page count, where you're talking about these performance work statements section, almost like an Amazon, survey of customer satisfaction. Here are these points that we ask about, and here's the project name, the size, the complexity. You can, of course, change this out, and here's where it checks that it is applicable, what you're providing is applicable to that current solicitation. Take the time to read that. It really was a well-written document. And again, if you can't access those handouts, let me know and I'm happy to send those to you. Also, they will be posted on our website as the recording is posted. So we should have that up probably Monday for sure, end of day Monday. So, do you have questions? You guys have been pretty quiet with us thus far. So if you want to disabuse me of the notion that we've done a stellar job and ask those questions now, point it out now, or if you have questions after the fact, or if you're working with this solicitation, this is Randy's contact information. And of course, we have our PTAC information as well on the next slide. If I can get, there we go. Here, I'll contact for ourselves. Randy, any closing comments to today's topic?
Just I'll send you a couple of links to it, but it's one thing that we didn't, unless I missed it, didn't talk about is that subcontractors can now request past performance or performance reports from their prime. And there's some kind of strict rules about it. You have to ask within 30 days and some other things. But the rule says that primes shall provide performance ratings if asked for. So, and that's just something we can add. It's pretty new, and I'll dig out the references and send them to you later.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Randy. If you
really
send
like
that to me, I can get that out to our
who's out
buddies.
there. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I really would like to hear from the audience. Who's out there? What's your interest? And if there's anything else that we can answer, or any other subjects you'd like to have us cover.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free. And if you want, like I said, you can just click the raise a hand and I can unmute you. So you don't necessarily have to type it in. And you're always welcome to send these questions after the fact too. I know we're rolling up on that lunch hour and priorities are starting to change. Any comments, anyone that they want to throw in there? Okay. Well, Randy, if I get any emails after the fact, I'll be happy to share those with you. So again, our contact information, just a quick information about the Apex Accelerator program. And just as a reminder that, we're one of 94 across US, Puerto Rico, and Guam. So as you're doing performance in other areas outside of Alaska, feel free to check out. We have the Apex APTAC-US or the Department of Defense Apex Accelerator website and see the locations for other offices for the PTAC program. And that brings us to today's closing of today's topic.